Welcome back to the Currents Podcast. Today we're joined by Mike Merritt with Siren Skate Shop and Bike Norfolk. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Mike, you're doing a lot in the community. You've got a skate shop. You're with Bike Norfolk. But I want to run it back and see, how did you first end up here in Norfolk?
Like many people, the Navy brought me here. I was stationed overseas for about 11 years in Europe. And eventually the Navy said, return to Kaunas. And so I came back to a destroyer here, and that was in 2003, the summer of 2003, right before Isabel.
What made you want to stay in Norfolk after you left the Navy?
A couple of things. One, we bought a house in Ocean View, and we really liked it. We have 3 boys who all went to Norfolk Public Schools, or one's still in school. We like the community. We like the people. For us as a family, my family, I'm from Massachusetts, so it was relatively close to get up to the East Coast. My wife is from Spain, so it's it's about as close as you can get to Spain and live in America. So as a whole, it was a good equidistant for us in a sense. And then Norfolk's just a nice city to live in, so we've been happy here.
That's awesome. And was that your first impression of Norfolk when you got stationed here with the Navy?
Yeah, I did a port visit several years ago, but otherwise, when we first moved here, this was all new to us. I'd never been here before, so yeah.
When did you have the idea for the skate shop? Was this after you were out of the military or still while you were serving?
Well, thoughts grow in size. I live not far away from Northside Park, and anytime I would drive up Tidewater Drive past the park, I would see the skate park being used pretty much year-round. Short of inclement weather, rain or something, there's always somebody in the park skateboarding. Where we lived on Hammett, I'd see skateboarders passing by our house on their way to the park. So I knew there was a steady demand for it. Meanwhile, across the street from it, there's an empty retail space. And so I'd look at the skate park, and I'd look at the empty building, and another drive-by and say, somebody needs to build a skate shop there.
And were you a skater yourself?
Yes, yeah. As a kid, skateboarded around town, everything like that. Built a half pipe in our backyard, so yeah.
Cool. And so picking that location near Northside Park was both great for being close to the skate park, but also close to home, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we're within walking distance of home, so my walk to and from work is cutting through Northside Park, which is pretty pleasant.
When did you actually take the leap and start the skate shop?
That was 2017. I had retired from active duty in 12. And then picked up a GS position on base doing the same work. I was working in human resources. Didn't really enjoy being a petty bureaucrat and sitting at a desk and, inbox and emails and meetings and such. And the idea just kept growing on me till finally in 2017, I'm like, let me take a step and attempt this. I did it. I first opened up the shop just in the evenings from 5 p.m. to 9. So I was working my day job, raced to the shop, and then open up at 5. And
what was it like balancing both of those to, have a full-time job and then also run the skate shop in the evenings?
I mean, it was 2 full-time jobs at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas office work is sort of mind draining. The shop itself is very energizing for me. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy the work. I enjoy the challenge, the business problem of putting it together, keeping customers happy. Customers are generally always happy when they're buying a skateboard or roller skates or bikes or anything. So it's very energizing. So I'd get more energy from working in the evening, doing what I loved doing and what I had fun doing than compared to, my desk job.
Awesome. And was that a tough transition going from the kind of desk job bureaucrat, like you said, to then jumping into a skate shop, which is, I'm sure, a lot of different moving parts and inventory and all of that?
Yeah, it was strange. As a kid, I worked in a retail business, but that was really the extent of my retail knowledge. So yes, working, in the military is very predictable, and you know what you're supposed to do, and there's rules and procedures, and you're following them and such. Whereas the shop was the complete opposite, very free-flowing, anything goes. The inventory guy, I'm the plumber, I'm the cleaner, I'm the sign painter, the window washer, the sales rep, the bike, so you're doing everything all at the same time.
Yeah. Not just a lot of hats, but all the hats. Right?
All the hats, exactly. Caps for sale, yep.
Cool. Well, were there any lessons you learned kind of moving into that and wearing all the hats at the same time?
Yeah, constantly. I'm a lot wiser now for it all. Yeah, my first property, I was actually in a different location, and it was just sort of like a rookie mistake. I moved in, signed the lease, got in, set up, and then it started getting cool towards the winter time, and I looked for the thermostat, and there was no thermostat. There was no HVAC in the space at all, neither heat nor air conditioning, because it was just architecturally is a strange setup. I'm like, well, gee, this is, so I had a little electric space heaters and such to get through the winter. My next, the place I moved into, I made sure that it had HVAC, which is something I hadn't even thought about the first go around. Who builds a building without HVAC in it? But
right. I think that would be included all the time, right?
Right. You just, so it's like small things like that where you need to check and make sure,
The pandemic has definitely been, I think, challenging for a lot of small business owners. What was that like as you kind of hit that March 2020 time?
Holy smokes. It was crazy. Well, at first, and I was talking with, another skate shop, like, what are you doing, and are you going to stay open? Like, they say we should just close down for 2 weeks and this whole thing will blow over. I'm like, okay, I'm going to close down. You're going to close down. So, yeah, shut down for 2 weeks, let the pandemic pass by, and it was all over, right?
We know how that went, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then so simultaneously, if you remember, everybody wanted, you couldn't do anything outside. Everybody wanted to do these individual activities. And luckily for me, my whole product line is individual sports.
Yeah.
Skateboarding is an individual activity. Roller skating is an individual activity. Bicycling is an individual activity, right? That you don't have to do in a group and you can do, with social distancing.
Yep.
So even though I was closed for 2 weeks, I was still going into the shop and doing work that I needed to do, admin kind of things. And somebody would knock on the door and like, I just want to buy a bicycle. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, the whole industry and many industries, toilet paper industry. But we, quickly sold out of bicycles, and then it became like impossible to get bicycles and roller skates and skateboards. So the whole supply chain, as you know, was jammed up or, depleted, and nothing was coming over from Asia where most of the materials are, produced. So it was hard. So it went
from a scary shutdown to then potentially booming and then turn around to be
no
scary
product
again.
to sell. And you couldn't, whereas in the past, if you're doing a repair on a bike and need a derailleur, you go online, you go to the wholesale site and you just order it. Bang, you'd spend 2 or 3 hours searching through every wholesaler looking for, that particular derailleur that you need. Trucks, I couldn't get trucks for skateboards for a while, and I went down to the van store downtown and I bought a whole bunch of trucks, at, retail cost, and then came back and resold them, but I was still able to make the sale on the rest of the skateboard, the deck, the grip tape, the bearings, wheels, roller skates. We started making our own custom roller skates because you couldn't buy complete roller skates. So we're making them out of vans. So a lot of adapting, a lot of time spent, a lot of repairing inner tubes because couldn't even buy inner tubes. There were just none left in the country to get. It was, on and on. Very crazy times.
So these days, what makes up the most of the business? Is it the skateboarding industry? Is it the roller skates, the bicycles?
Yes. They all balance each other out pretty evenly. Okay. Some days are heavy on, repair work. Other days we, sell bikes, or do a bunch of roller skates or something.
Yeah. So
all facets, of the business sort of support each other at different times fairly evenly throughout.
Cool. And do you see the same kind of balance in your repairs and the kind of service space versus the actual retail and selling product?
Yeah, I would say that's part of the balance. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's great to see in a business like the diverse income streams, right? And probably gives you a little bit of extra safety too.
Exactly. As far as skateboard shops go, there's only one skateboard shop that I know of that solely sells skateboards and nothing but skateboards, and that's a shop called Uncle Funky's in New York City.
Cool.
Most other skateboard shops have to supplement their revenue. Generally, they do it by sneakers. If you go into pretty much any skateboard shop, 70% of their floor space is sneakers and clothing and backpacks or whatnot.
Just streetwear and street culture individually. Yeah,
exactly. And then maybe a third of their retail space is actually for skateboards themselves.
Cool.
I didn't want to become a shoe store because there's so many other places to buy sneakers, so that's where I divested is the wrong word. Branched into roller skates and scooters and bikes is my alternate instead. It's
ironic given you're putting sneakers on the custom roller skates, right?
So. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's come full circle.
Couldn't leave the sneakers altogether.
Yep. Yeah. You have to bring in your sneakers if you want to get them mounted, though.
Okay. So, yeah. That makes sense. So, along the way of building a skate shop and bike shop and roller skate shop, I know you've been involved in the community a lot as well, right?
Yes.
So what's your role with Bike Norfolk, and what is Bike Norfolk?
Bike Norfolk is a advocacy group for bicycling in the city of Norfolk. Mm-hmm. We do many things. One, we advocate to the city government for the implementation of bike lanes and more infrastructure for riding around the city. We also have we have built mountain bike trails in Northside Park in partnership with, the city parks and such, and a grant from REI. So we maintained those trails. We put up sign. We cleared out all the brush back in the far corner of Northside Park for single track mountain biking.
For those folks who maybe aren't familiar with Northside Park, can you tell us maybe where the bicycle trails were and what they looked like before?
Northside Park is essentially a triangle up in Ocean View, just south of Bayview, north of Little Creek Road, off of Tidewater Drive. The far corner of it was almost completely overgrown and pretty much abandoned to any kind of use that people chose to do back there.
I grew up there, so I remember, as a teenager, seeing just the wilderness there.
Exactly. It was a wilderness. I'm trying to think of the right word, but it was, a wilderness. Nobody went back there other than people up to mischief of some sorts. So it wasn't really open to the general public as much as a safe place to go. What we did with Bike Norfolk is we cleared out a lot of their area back there. We cleared out trails and paths. So specifically for the intent of mountain biking on those trails, but obviously walkers and everything go back there. So now it's an open, clear area where pretty much anybody goes. I see children walking back there, having no problems at all. So it's very nice to see. As I pass by it daily on my walk to work, it's nice to see people using it of all ages and groups. So it's nice.
Yeah, that's a really nice thing you've done for the community there.
To continue about Bike Norfolk, we also do a bicycle maintenance at a soup kitchen a couple times a year. If you notice around Norfolk, there are many people who get around on bicycles just out of necessity as their only means of transportation. Oftentimes those bicycles are in poor repair. So at a couple of the charities that have soup kitchens, we'll set up shop there, for morning and repair, chains, change flats, put brakes on bikes. Oftentimes their brakes have, fallen off, so we'll give them brakes. Any kind of repairs to keep their bikes in good, in working condition. We also do bicycle giveaways. People donate bikes to us, and we find, people will fix them up and find people who need bicycles. And then we also do a bike light giveaway as well. Generally in November, after the time shift and it's darker, we'll ride around looking for bicyclists who don't have lights on, and we'll, chase them down and offer them a light and get them set up. So we do all those things as well as just bike lanes on Granby Street. Yeah.
It's awesome. And that's awesome. And how many folks are in Bike Norfolk? Is that a big group doing all that work?
So we don't have an official membership roster, email roster. The board is about 7 or 8 people, sort of the core member of it. There's a wider circle of people who consistently show up to different events and help out as we need fit. We basically work off of our Facebook page, and there we have around 2,100 followers of the page that we can reach out to and, marshal that kind of support. So there's definitely a large support of people interested in bicycling in Norfolk, but we don't have a set membership count.
That's awesome. And so the group is advocating for more bicycle infrastructure in the Norfolk, as well as, helping folks out. But why would you say Bike Norfolk feels that biking infrastructure is so important to the city?
Well, we'll start with global warming. Internal combustion engines of cars, pump carbon into the atmosphere and, are cooking our planet. Anytime any national news organization wants to stock footage of a city, suffering under the effects of rising sea levels, they always come to Norfolk as,
Same shot, right? The Chrysler and the Hague, a little bit of water over the...
Yeah. So we're very much on the front lines. It's either Norfolk or New Orleans on the front lines of the effects of sea level rise as a result of global warming, which, on an individual level, motor vehicles and such. Obviously, there's lots of contributing factors, but that's one that is within our capability to shift away from, which essentially has to happen. Bicycles themselves, are green. They don't produce any carbon emissions. It's the most effective or efficient energy-wise, per calorie used to moving somebody forward, mode of transportation. So that's the first one. Car deaths, cars are extremely dangerous. Year before, I think we had 11 or 12 pedestrians killed by motor vehicles.
Just here in Norfolk?
In Norfolk, yes. And that's pedestrians. That's not counting, people inside the cars as well. Numerous, disadvantages to using cars. They take up excessive amounts of space. They're dangerous. It's not active transportation. You're not as healthy if you're sitting in a car driving as opposed to using active transportation to get there. So it's just more fun.
Yeah, and given your work with the soup kitchen and helping folks repair their bikes, I anticipate there's a bit of kind of economic access issue there as well, where folks who maybe can't afford a car can still get to work with a bike.
Well, absolutely, yes. So I think around 30% of Norfolk residents do not own a car. And so they have to find other means of transportation, whether it be a bicycle or public transportation or walking or, Lime scooters or whatever. So a significant portion of the Norfolk population does not use a car as their primary mode of transportation. But yet, as a city, we dedicate so many resources, time, money, landscape, space to that one singular mode of transportation, which it needs to be balanced out more.
So what is the current state of biking in Norfolk? Do you think that biking around town is good, or is it bad? Is it ugly, dangerous? What's the current state of things?
I bike every day, constantly. I bike to get around anytime, I'm going someplace. That's my first choice of mode of transportation, generally. The city of Norfolk came up with a strategic bicycle plan in 2014 and 15. We're now 8 years later, and by the city's own count, well, to when there's not even somebody actually actively tracking the progress made on it, but roughly they're 25% complete on this plan. So bicycle lanes are not interconnected. The plan itself is very comprehensive for the whole city. There was a lot of studies done, a lot of work done in putting in it and finding it, but only various segments of it have been completed. So bike lanes start and stop at random. There's no consistency. So like to get here for me, coming down Norfolk, Granby Street from Ocean View, there's sharrows a little bit, but then the sharrows stop. And then, the bulk of Granby Street is a 3-lane road, 3-lane highway practically. Cars are driving at highway speeds there regularly. Then you could come onto Llewellyn, so there's a bike lane. So it's very intermixed. Ocean View starts and stops with bike lanes. So it's okay. It's moving better. If I did the math, 8 years, what's, 25%? So 40 years. So 2055 is when they'll complete the plan if they stay on track. So that's frustrating. For comparison, Paris also started a major transformation of their infrastructure and installing bicycle lanes throughout the city. And now Paris is a case study of like how well a city can do when they change it. Bicycle infrastructure, using Paris as an example or any other spot, nobody bikes because or very few people will bicycle on roads where they have to share space with cars because they feel it's unsafe, and there's good reason for that sentiment. Once bike lanes are installed, though, it's like they come out of the woodwork. Everybody starts riding. So there's this like a lot of pent-up demand for it, but people will not do it until they feel safe doing it, and they won't ride until the lanes themselves are put in. Norfolk really could have been there. We could have, put in a solid effort. The city's relatively compact and dense from, one end to the other. It's probably 8 miles, 9 miles at most. Any kid going to school only has, 1 or 2 miles distance to travel to their school, an easy biking distance for most children, but there's no safe infrastructure for them. Yeah. Nobody, it's still very hard to get around the city, and the city's moving at a painfully slow pace to implement that. In comparison, the entirety of, because, people will say, well, these things take time. I get that, but, the entirety of World War II, and Norfolk played, it's an important role in it, was completed in less than 5 years. From December 1941 to August of 45, we got a lot accomplished. So when government wants to make something happen, they can. Or the space program. Kennedy in 63 said, I want to put a man on the moon. By 69, 6 years later, we have a man on the moon. Yep. But we still don't have bike lanes on Granby Street.
So from your perspective, or maybe Bike Norfolk's perspective, if you could, snap your fingers and have something happen with the city council voting on something, is there one project that you think is maybe most important or top number one priority that would be a game changer?
Project, I would say Granby Street is probably the most visible artery in Norfolk. And as a result of, the work putting together the plan and stuff, if Granby Street had protected bike lanes from Waterside to Ocean View. That would be a huge game changer out in riding. And that could be done overnight with traffic cones, traffic cones and paint, orange barrels.
Yeah.
Granby Street routinely, when they were doing the bridge over the Lafayette, was reduced down to 1 or 2 lanes, and they had barrels up, and nobody fussed about it. And traffic still moved, relatively well. But the city's priority should be, and we requested it this past year for the budget, and they haven't added it, is somebody on city staff who's actively, bicycles are, actively, pushing for these infrastructure problems. Oftentimes, a road will be, even if the road is on the strategic plan, Public Works Department will go and repave it, but they won't paint on the new bike lanes because they weren't necessarily in the loop as to what was going on, so they just repainted it as it existed.
Yeah.
And that was like, golden opportunity to add the bike lanes. So a dedicated person on city staff who's pushing for bicycle infrastructure, who's working on it. I rode this morning up in Ocean, and there's sand all on view in the bike lane, so you have to go out into traffic with the cars. And even though we submitted a Norfolk Cares request, they're like, okay, maybe we'll get around to sweeping it, So that's a dangerous situation, which can easily be prevented. So having somebody on the staff, on city, keeping that as their primary function would be the most important.
What is Bike Norfolk maybe looking for from the community?
Get out and ride. I would say you can look to riding a bicycle as your first thought when going somewhere, when choosing to go someplace. Look for where there are bicycle, infrastructure.
Yeah.
Look for side streets that are not as heavily traveled by cars. You can make a difference, just choosing to ride, anywhere, any short trips you make, over to a friend's house or whatnot, or to a brewery or whatnot. Every time you turn the key of the ignition, you're contributing to, CO2 in the atmosphere. So if you can put a pause to that, like they say, if you're in a hole, the first step is to stop digging. We look for volunteers to support on our events, on our Facebook page is where we do most of our public outreach. We have a website as well, which our information is at. Occasionally, we'll do campaigns to city council to, push on a specific agenda. And if people can come and speak to city council and say, yes, I would love for my kids to ride bikes to school, but there's no, safe infrastructure or whatnot. When we do calls out, would love for people to come and support at that time.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. I think there seems to be a lot of momentum in biking in Norfolk, at least in pockets. Are you hopeful that more people are going to be involved in bicycle advocacy?
Yes, I am. I definitely see it growing and more people getting involved, more and more people riding bikes. I don't have a necessarily good system for counting, but I'll say anecdotally, I see a lot more people using bikes to get around. Last night we were at Guad's on Granby Street, and there was a whole family that had a bike there,
Wow.
And that's fantastic, And I was like, where'd you guys bike from? And only like just down the block or something, but they chose, bicycling as their way to get to Guad's. So it is happening more and more as the city, continues to build infrastructure. I think it'll accelerate, hopefully.
That's awesome. With advocating for bikes in the city, and there's the kind of climate change perspective, there's also the safety perspective, but I imagine it's also kind of an economic access issue as well, right? Where folks who can afford a bike maybe can't afford a car. And so if they can bike to work, that makes getting a job even cheaper.
Absolutely. I mean, oftentimes bicycling will be perceived as, an exclusive luxury sport and, these, $5,000 bicycles and guys in spandex, barreling along. But more to the point or the bicyclists that you don't see is, what have been called the invisible bicyclists, people who are using bicycles just to get around, and that is their only form of transportation. They're, I'm in a situation where I can, alternate. I do have a vehicle. I do have a car. If I need to, drive someplace, I can, although I'll elect to use a bicycle. These folks, the bicycle is their only means of getting around, and it's, to getting to a job or whatnot. I think of Azteca Restaurant on, Little Creek Road, which would be a prime road to have a protected bicycle lanes. It's major thoroughfare, but it's to ride on it is an extremely dangerous road to ride on, and no recreational rider rides on Little Creek Road. But if you ever pass by Azteca Restaurant, you'll see about 10 bicycles locked up to the side there, and that's all the workers there, all the the kitchen staff, the waiters. They're riding bicycles just to get to work, and that's their commute. So there's a lot of folks, a lot of riders like them who don't consider themselves bicyclists. It's just their way of getting around. And those guys are really important to me as to having a safe way to get to work. And they shouldn't have to risk their life going to work by riding on Little Creek Road. They should have, a safe way to get to work. And that's spread throughout the city. I just named that one spot as an example, but you'll see guys riding around like that all over the place.
And so, we're talking a lot about bicycles, but a lot of the infrastructure applies to other maybe micromobility categories, the electric scooters or electric bikes and that sort of thing. Do you see that as something kind of expanding the importance of bicycle infrastructure?
Absolutely. The whole time we've been talking about bicycle infrastructure, and that definitely was the lead on it. But all those forms of transportation, electric scooters and electric bikes as well, which, is a different category. You see scooter riders going around everywhere in the city. And, Lime has been very good about providing that service. But again, there's no safe infrastructure for scooter riders to ride on. A lot of youth ride on them, and they're, again, forced to share the roadway with cars. And that's, luckily, as to best of my knowledge, we haven't had any fatalities between the two, but it is definitely a situation that's dangerous. And alternative road infrastructure would, provide some safety for those people.
I think you've got me kind of hopeful for the future of biking in Norfolk, and I hope that the work Bike Norfolk does kind of continues. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Today is, September or something? Mid-September. It's a beautiful fall day out. Go out and ride a bike, even if it's just for fun. If it's not working, bring it to your local bike shop, and they'll happily get it riding for you or working for you. Yeah, go ride a bike.
Awesome.
It's a lot more fun than it looks.
Well, Mike, thanks for being here.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.